Yeah, 1989. It was a big year for a number of reasons in my personal life. One, it was the fact that I was born during that month, of course. But, yeah, we've covered most of the movies that have come out in 1989 on Time About the Movies. So I figure since I kind of stole the idea from the Cinema Snobs Year in Film, I figure why not do the same thing this time in the world of television, because, over the course of the last 37 years of my life, I've been around to see some of television, how television has gone from being just something you see simply on your TV screen to something that has been broadened out to everywhere, from streaming to the internet. I mean, the thing I'm using right now to record this video would have never been able to do this back in 1989. In fact, not even the cell phone, not even having a cell phone this small would be something that we'd be doing right now. But that's just the power of how time has changed over the last 37 years in general. In 1989, there was a lot of big things that happened in television. Significant events, including debuts, finales, and cancellations of TV shows, obviously. Some shows that are still very much alive to this day. I mean, if you were to tell me that in 1989, the shows like Cops, The Simpsons, America's Funniest Home Videos would still be going on to this very day, I don't think anybody would have ever imagined that would have been a possibility. We saw a number of different things happening over the course of the year, television events, things that we weren't really expecting to happen, like the Berlin Wall coming down, or, an earthquake happening during the World Series. There are so many big things that have happened in television over the course of the year in 1989. And I figure, why not do this thing every month where I take a look back at some of the years at the year in television in general, and look at each month in general. So this month we'll look at January, and then next month we'll look at February, and so on and so forth. We'll see how this pans out, and who knows, once we get done with Time About the Movies at the end of this year, this could become the new thing for me. So, let's go ahead and get this a shot here. I've got a list of some notable shows and movies and events that have happened in January of 1989, and so let's go ahead and start off with the first one at the top of the list, the thing that literally premiered on January 1st, 1989.
America loved her music, and through her music, she will live forever. It's a bittersweet story of success and tragedy, tonight on the CBS Tuesday Movie.
And yes, we've just begun.
She was the girl next door, one in a million.
That voice.
Caught in the harsh glare of rock superstardom.
Hey, you believe this is every kid's dream? This is too much, too fast.
Haunted by an obsession to be loved.
I'm gonna find somebody who just wants me.
If all you knew about her was the music, then you only knew half the truth.
Got to get help.
A death that shocked the nation. The Karen Carpenter story. Next.
One of the many, many movies on television around that time, and this was back when TV movies didn't look like cheap movies that would have been seen on the Hallmark Channel or Lifetime Channel overall. No, these are movies that actually the networks put a lot of effort into it overall, and here was one of the many of them, and that was the Karen Carpenter story. This is, of course, the story of Karen Carpenter, who on February 4th, 1983, died at her home after dealing with a bout with anorexia. And this is a story about how she and her brother, Richard, rose to superstardom all the way up to her tragic death in 1983. Now that commercial you saw there was actually from a rebroadcast of this, because the original broadcast version of that intro was not available, but this has Cynthia Gibbs starring as Karen Carpenter and Mitchell Anderson as her brother Richard. It also features Louise Fletcher and Peter Goetz among the cast in this, directed by Joseph Sargent, whose previous work before this was Jaws: The Revenge. Yeah. So, yeah, you should probably lower your expectations right off the get-bat with this movie in general here. And as far as the movie itself goes, it was all right, I guess. I mean, it's about what you expect from a generic biopic as a whole. It's funny how Richard Carpenter himself has had these ranging reactions to this movie in general. Like, at the time the movie came out, he said, certain things were overblown. Not that I'm trying to take away from anything from the importance of the event. Karen's battle with anorexia, mine with sleeping pills, but it was still a little melodramatic. Like, neither of us, for anyone that watched this movie, literally collapsed. In fact, when I saw that, I told them while it was being made, look, neither of us fell down here. Karen didn't on stage, and I didn't go down a flight of stairs, but we're dealing with a TV movie, so you have to take it with a grain of salt, and each little thing not exactly the way it happened, that's all. But it's still a fairly accurate log of 20 years of our lives. Which is funny, because later on in the year, not even later on in the year, Actually, yeah, later, this was before the movie came out. He said, I was in two minds about the film from the start but I knew it had to be made. I had to be involved. I accepted that parts of our lives with all celebrities are matters of public record, and for somebody else to have done this without the family's blessing, well, it wouldn't have just been as well told. 26 years later, 16 years later. Yeah, 16 years later, 2004, yeah, he had a completely different tone about how he felt about this movie. He called it 90 minutes of creative license that gives biopics and genuine a dubious tone. He also stated at the time he considered being involved in the film one of his biggest mistakes. So yeah, he probably saw it because somebody at CBS said, "Look at what's going to happen once this movie comes out. You and your sister's records are going to go soaring," and that's exactly what happened because this thing did become the highest-rated TV movie of the year and the third highest-rated TV movie of the '80s. And yeah, Karen Carpenter and Richard Carpenter's music did become popular for a good bit there afterwards, and it was nominated for an Emmy Award for outstanding sound mixing for a limited series or movie. But yeah, it's a movie where it's just kind of like, it is what it is. It's a typical biopic movie, but it's not offensively bad overall. It just feels like it's been there, done that before, and it's a TV movie, so it's nothing really that terrible overall. So yeah, not really off to the best start overall in terms of stuff coming out this year, but hey, the late night wars is getting booming early on here. You know, Johnny Carson's getting up there in his age. He just celebrated 26 years of hosting the Tonight Show. So other networks have to come in and say, hey, we need to go ahead and come in here and take a little bit of this late night reigns. And so CBS said, here's our answer to that.
Make a break for the Pat Sajak Show, weeknights on CBS.
Yeah, spoiler alert, not a whole lot of people made a day for the Pat Sajak Show. So this was a show idea by CBS, who wanted to go ahead and try to grab into the late night boom that NBC was dominating at this point with Johnny Carson and the Tonight Show and David Letterman. So CBS said, you know, we're going to try to do it with our own late night show with Pat Sajak. Pat Sajak was a very popular game show host at the time, of course, for his work on Wheel of Fortune, and, you know, he hosted a daytime version of Wheel of Fortune all the way up to doing this, and he was still doing the syndicated version of the show ever since that he left the original daytime show. He's been, of course, been still doing that ever since until his retirement in 2024. But yeah, this is a show where it's essentially, you know, it's basically a late night format where you got the talk show host, the talk show host in Sajak, the announcer, the house band led by Tom Scott, which coincidentally was also the house band leader when the Chevy Chase show came out. And I bring this up because Chevy Chase was the first guest on this show. And yeah, you know how Chevy Chase had a terrible late night show of his own. So it kind of all connects together, can you see? But, you know, Pat Sajak could have made the show work. However, one of the biggest examples of it when you know you're not really doing anything right, you waste a lot of time in your opening. You either waste a lot of time or you do the thing where it's just like, give yourselves a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, because you're just trying to kill time. Case in point with this.
You're very well trained. Thank you very much. Boy, now that I've got you all here, I'd like to talk to you about something called Herbalife, if I may. I should explain, if it looks like I'm just killing time, I have a reason here. In less than 1 minute, we will officially become CBS's longest-running show this season.
Sajak does.
Which admittedly is actually a funny bit right there, you know, that we're actually now the longest running CBS show in late night, which I thought that was actually pretty good. But yeah, I think people obviously were kind of too, they really thought, you know, if we're going to watch one or the other, we might as well go watch Johnny Carson or watch the next guy we're going to get to in a little bit here. But yeah, not surprisingly, the show didn't last very long, and it was a major, major flop for CBS. I mean, the show actually started off as a 90-minute show in the early part of the year, and then in October they cut it down to 60 minutes, and then not but a couple weeks later they basically started bringing in replacement host because, they didn't think anything was going to pan out with the show because it really wasn't doing well in the ratings, which led to the most notable episode, which is also the most controversial episode, and that is the one where, for some reason, Rush Limbaugh was given the job of hosting the show. And, needless to say that the show did not pan out very well overall, and not surprisingly, about 2 weeks later, the show was essentially canceled, and then that was pretty much the end of the road for the Pat Sajak Show, and for CBS and late night in general, up until David Letterman came to them in 1993. But one of the other big reasons why the show didn't last very long was simply and effectively that somebody else was taking over that nobody really expected to happen. Yeah, I mean, essentially, Arsenio Hall was somebody who really came out of nowhere, and he actually premiered not but 6 days earlier than Pat Sajak is, so he already had the upper hand of essentially going into this and getting a result from people, because, yeah, the point of bringing Pat Sajak onto the CBS show was to get a younger demographic to the show, but Arsenio Hall was already doing that, not just before this show came out, but back when Fox had their own late show, when they were just starting up. The big thing was that, Arsenio Hall was very popular when he came in to fill in for Joan Rivers, but unfortunately, they only agreed to let him on the air for 13 weeks, and before they could re-sign him to do anything, he had already signed on to star in Coming to America, so it was already too late for them to get him, and so essentially they had to do another late show without him, and of course the show didn't last very long there. But then after Coming to America, Paramount said, hey, want to come in and do a late night talk show for us? And lo and behold, the Arsenio Hall show did go on to become the massive hit that everyone thought the Sajak Show was going to be, essentially because it was opening the door to a younger audience in late night television that really wasn't there except for David Letterman. And, Arsenio Hall really was the guy that broke the door open, because not but 2 years later, Johnny Carson was announcing his retirement, and Jay Leno was going to come in and do The Tonight Show, which led to a lot of controversies of its own. But yeah, the Arsenio Hall show was a game changer, not just for late night television, but for talk show television in general, and ran for a good couple of years. I mean, 1994 was when it came to an end, and they brought it back in 2013, and I thought it was a fun time watching it when that was back when it was on in during 2013. I was too young to see it when it was actually airing in '89, so, but you get the idea. Yeah, it's a show that really did change a lot in late night television as a whole. It did what CBS thought Pat Sajak was going to do, and just sadly did not do it whatsoever. So let's go ahead and move on to, let's step away from a couple of TV shows and movies and talk about some broadcast premieres that are noticeable from this early part of the year.
Tonight, an ABC premiere presentation.
So long, man.
Robert Loggia, Michelle Pfeiffer, and Al Pacino, the unforgettable Scarface next Saturday.
So this particular first weekend of the year was actually pretty interesting because you had two Universal movies that were heavily cut down from their original theatrical release. And one of the big ones at first was Scarface, which premiered on January 7th on ABC. And it was a version that was heavily cut down, like 32 minutes of violence, profanity, sex were removed. A lot of the dialogue, including the constant use of the word fuck, was replaced and muted at the beginning with the F-bomb. And then they replaced with less offensive alternatives and lines that don't make a whole lot of sense. Like there's that line where, the guy's going like, where'd you get the beauty scar, tough guy, eating pussy? And then Tony Montana's just like, how am I going to get a scar eating pussy? And then in the TV version, it's just like, where'd you get the beauty scar, tough guy, eating pineapple? It's like, how am I going to scar eating pineapple? It's just like, yeah, exactly. It's just like, what the hell were you talking about? Like, what the hell was that? Like, it makes no sense whatsoever. And it makes no sense to the point where it's actually available on the DVDs and the Blu-rays of this, so you can see how they butchered this so badly when it first came on the air. But that was not the only one that did this. The other one that did it was not but a day later when Universal actually released a cut of the movie Brazil from director Terry Gilliam, airing as a part of their syndicated package. And so they took this movie that was 142 minutes long, trimmed it down to 93 minutes, and it was a heavily modified version that remained true to the then CEO at the time, Sid Sheinberg's preferred cut of the movie, which modified the dark sci-fi satire into an uplifting romance and completes with a happy ending, and subsequently giving it the nickname The Love Conquers All cut. And, you know, how this version managed to get released remains a mystery, to the point where even Terry Gilliam said that Universal asked him to make an edited for TV version of it, and he basically refused. And so, I mean, it's an incredibly bizarre story of how this got made. And as far as I know, I don't think that... I think this version might be available on Blu-ray as well. I could be wrong on that. I think it's part of the Criterion Collection, or... maybe it is part of the Criterion Collection, because it says here that it was released on Criterion with that version on there. So yeah, with both Scarface and Brazil, they're out there so you can watch how the studios butchered these movies, these really great movies in general, because yeah, it was something where it's just like, what the hell were you guys thinking by doing this? But, so yeah, those were a couple of premieres for Universal movies that were heavily edited to shit by the studio. So let's go ahead and move on to the next thing that happened that was notable in television, and that was...
Peg gets the birthday blues.
Kid, why didn't you tell me it was your mother's birthday? I wouldn't have come home.
We discontinued my bra.
So Al goes shopping.
I knew when it looked like this. I knew it. I knew it. So what do you think, Steve? I got like this?
And while the boys are away,
Happy birthday, Peggy!
the girls will, well, you know,
You're my boyfriend. Would you like this?
Married with Children, Sunday on Fox.
Ah, yes, the infamous Married with Children episode that, you know, caused so much of a ruckus with Terry Rakolta, who had a campaign against the show to get it off the air, but it actually worked against her, and the show became even more popular than they could have possibly imagined. And it went on for literally went on for 8 more seasons after this episode aired. I mean, it was definitely something where this woman tried her best to get the show off the air, and it backfired on her so badly. This is an episode of Married with Children where, you know, you had Peg depressed on her birthday when her favorite bra is discontinued. So Alice discovered that her favorite bra is still being sold at a lingerie store in Wisconsin, and they go out to purchase it. And as you see from the commercial there, they find a lot of scantily clad women and all these different sexy lingerie. And yeah, apparently Terry Rakolta's kids were watching the show over the time, even though, you know, you have kids, you should be paying attention instead of whatever you were doing there. But it's just kind of like, yeah, she kind of brought that on herself in general. And yeah, it definitely backfired on her big time, because the thing where she's like, oh, look at this horrid show where these 2 men are just, you know, going into a lingerie store and all these scantily clad women are in there. And you know, she probably thought to herself that these people were going to go like, oh my God, you're right, this is absolutely disastrous. Like, I can't believe this. And no, they all basically went like, what show is this again? And essentially that's what happened in general. I mean, that literally is what happened with the show. It not only backfired on her, but the show became more and more popular as it went on. I mean, it was one of the shows that put Fox on the map, essentially. I mean, it was one of those big shows that made Sunday night must-see TV on Fox, because, you know, of course, around this time, The Simpsons was just coming on, and all these other shows they were putting on there. Like, this was one of the first real big hits that Fox had that really put them in the position to eventually become one of those big networks that could be right up there with ABC, CBS, and NBC. And it was all because of this particular episode that backfired on her so badly, but she still considers it a win, apparently. But that's a notable event that happened in January of 1989. But there's no other bigger event bigger than that than the Super Bowl that year.
Only unbeatable team: Rashad, McGuire, DeFord, and Costas. NFL Live at the Super Bowl.
Then the explosive Cincinnati Bengals battle the hard-hitting San Francisco 49ers. Super Bowl 23, Sunday, only on NBC.
A game seen at that time as the greatest Super Bowl ever, because it was a back-and-forth matchup, and there were so many stories going on before the game even took place. I mean, this is a Super Bowl that had so much going on behind the scenes. Like a week before the Super Bowl, A Hispanic Miami police officer shot and killed a speeding black motorist in the Overtown section of Miami, and a large crowd gathered and turned violent, leading to rioting, looting, which lasted 2 days into 2 days after the events had happened. And so, there was a television van and several automobiles broken into. They were set on fire. Police used tear gas against the rioters. A teenager was actually shot and killed, and more than $1 million worth of damage was being done. And there was actually a lot of rumors that they were going to move it to Tampa Bay. And, the incident later prompted the NFL to look at the league's hiring of minorities and its lack of black coaches at the time, which led into the Rooney Rule that came up later on in the year. But, they had so many things going on behind the scenes of the story. Not only with that, but noticeably with Stanley Wilson, the Bengals' best fullback, and their third leading rusher, who was caught using cocaine in this hotel room the night of the Super Bowl. And the Bengals just basically decided to throw him off decided not to let him play on the game anymore. It was actually his third violation of the policy, so he was basically banned from the league from that. And Sam White made the argument, said that once he told the guys that Stanley Wilson wasn't going to play, they had all these different coaches on that slamming their playbooks against the floor, because it's just like, yeah, this is your best player this is one of the best players you have, and yeah, because of his stupidness, he's not going to be able to play this game. But like I said, Cincinnati did make it close in this game, and there was a possibility that they could have won this game. They were down 16-13, and then Joe Montana went on the drive for 3 minutes and 10 seconds, marched 92 yards down the field with some help by Jerry Rice and John Taylor catching the touchdown with 34 seconds left in the game. It was a tight game overall, and it was a game where either team could have easily won that game overall. And it was so important for the Cincinnati Bengals that over 30 years later, when they win the Super Bowl again, the Rams decided to use that exact same playbook to win the Super Bowl, and that's exactly what they did there. So, San Francisco wins it 20-16, and the rest is NFL history. And then you have the post game, the show that's on after the Super Bowl. Nowadays, it's usually a scripted TV show. Maybe it's Survivor. Maybe it's the Winter Olympics. But back in 1989, NBC's smart decision to put a show after the Super Bowl essentially came down to this.
The CIA's best agents.
There's something going on that makes me expendable.
They never had time for love.
In our training, girls are only for sexual release.
Oh, wonderful.
And now they're running out of time.
Let's have a life, just you and me, a normal life.
Caught in the crossfire of conspiracy by the Brotherhood of the Rose. Sunday after the Super Bowl.
A miniseries. A miniseries that was literally 2 parts. This is it's a 2-hour thing coming after the Super Bowl, and ordinarily you don't do that. I mean, you don't usually put a movie on after the Super Bowl. Usually it's a show or an event or something else, but part 1 of a miniseries, it seemed like a really, really bad idea. But this is, of course, based off of the novel by David Morrell, and it was adapted by Guy Waldron, who wrote a lot of these TV movies miniseries back then. And it tells the story of Sal and Chris, played by Peter Strauss and David Morse, 2 orphans from Philadelphia, who are adopted by a man named Elliot, who treats the boys like his own children and raises them to become assassins. When a mission goes wrong for Sal and Chris is involved in an international incident, they begin to question their lives and their missions, and start to see Elliot in a new light. Elliot being played by Robert Mitchum. You also have Connie Selica, Emmett Walsh, James Hong. Some notable names of the time period overall, and it is what you think it is. It's a mini-series that is based off a popular novel, but doesn't really do anything that makes it stand out or anything overall. At least to me it didn't, So let's go ahead and move on to some other notable shows that premiered in 1989, starting off with Inside Edition.
She was only 14 when she won our hearts in the '76 Olympics, Nadia Comaneci. But after winning the gold medal, she spent more than a decade under the communist oppression of Romania. Now, with Eastern Europe opening up, Nadia's a free woman.
I wanted to have a free life.
She escaped to freedom with the help of her boyfriend. An exclusive interview with Nadia.
Ah, yes, Inside Edition. This was before the days of Bill O'Reilly going on there and saying, "We'll do it live, fuck it, fucking thing sucks." Even though he was on the show not too long after the show first premiered on January 9th. It's a show that's essentially a news magazine where you have the rest of each day's edition, mainly a mix of infotainment stories, entertainment news and gossip, scandals, true crime stories, and lifestyle features. And David Frost was actually the original host of the show until he was replaced by then ABC News reporter Bill O'Reilly, who went on to host that show for 6 years before he was eventually replaced by Deborah Norville. Of course, from the Today Show, who's going to make some other news later on in the year, but we'll touch on that later on. And, of course, the show is still going on after all these years, over 36 years later, 36 years later, excuse me, 36 years later. And, yeah, it's a show that still is on the air. It's a show that your grandmother probably still watches while you're waiting for Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune to start, or a primetime show, whichever, depending on what part of the country you're from. So, that's Inside Edition for you. So let's go ahead and move on to the next show.
Let's cut to the chase.
I demand that you stop this cab immediately!
That's a big help.
If they weren't having such fun, you'd think they were still married. Wednesday, a special preview of A Fine Romance at 10, 9 Central.
Ah, yes, A Fine Romance. Sounds like a promising show, but it kind of isn't. I mean, it's a show about a divorced couple working together on hosting a travel show called Ticket to Ride. The couple is being played by Christopher Casanova and Margaret Whitten, and it also has Ernie Sabella playing one of the other characters in the show. Now, this is one of the... Now, something I have to keep in mind here is that this is around the time of the writer's strike. But, the writer's strike had just come to an end not but a few months prior to this. So this was originally supposed to be a show that was supposed to air in the fall of '88, but then got pushed back and replaced by the new Mission Impossible series, which was an inexpensive program alternative that the network was using to fill time during the strike. And so they essentially moved the show to Thursday nights at 8 o'clock, which doesn't sound like it's a bad thing until you realize the show is going in direct competition with The Cosby Show, A Different World, 48 Hours, so, yeah. Not surprisingly, this thing didn't last very long. It was canceled after 2 months on the air, and really, I don't think there was really a whole lot there to the show in general. It looked like it was trying to be a mix between a travelogue and Heart to Heart, but not being successful at either one of them. So let's go ahead and move on to a more successful show, Tom Bosley as Father Dowling.
Night. Oh my God. A special series premiere movie. A man died in my confessional. Tom Bosley's up to his collar in crime. It's my lucky day. If the police haven't got a prayer, I think I've got it. What's an amateur detective got? My feet are killing me. An all-new 2-hour Father Dowling Mysteries Friday.
Kind of sort of an in-series universe show with Matlock. I mean, it's made by the same people who made Matlock, and I think he has been seen in crossovers with Matlock, and not only that, I think some other shows as well. But this is Father Dowling Mysteries, in which you have Tom Bosley, who plays a Catholic priest who solves murders, abductions, and other mysteries in a Chicago parish, assisted by a young streetwise nun named Sister Stephanie, played by Tracy Nelson, despite hindrance from the bishop's representative, Father Prestwick, played by James Stevens. And this began originally as a TV pilot movie called Fatal Confession, kind of like how Matlock began as a TV movie as well back in 1986 with Dick Van Dyke as the bad guy in it. And so the show was eventually made into a TV series, and of course, like what I said before with A Fine Romance, the show was essentially kind of messed around with the writer's strike, so it didn't begin airing until 1989. And actually ran on NBC for about 8 episodes before they canceled the show. And then ABC picked it up about 2 years later, where actually, for about 2 years, I should say, because it ran 2 seasons more afterwards. So it did become somewhat of a success later on down the road, but not to the point where it had the same kind of longevity as Matlock did, which ran on for 9 seasons. But I don't know. This is the type of show where it fits right into the Matlock and the heat of the night, Murder, She Wrote crowd. You go to your grandmother's on a Sunday afternoon and it's playing on TV, and you watch it as a kid, and yeah, you have a good time with it. But for me personally, it was just never my thing overall. I mean, I like Matlock a lot, but this one, it's just nothing I really got totally invested into overall. Not to say that it's a bad show, but I don't know. I prefer Matlock, me personally. But so that's a somewhat successful show around this time. Now here's some crappy shows.
Dolphin Cove is on a thrilling search for buried treasure, but the price may be too high.
Your priorities are so far out of whack.
Dolphin Cove.
With a name like Dolphin Cove, you would think that Peter Benchley's name would be involved in this, and sure enough, yes it is. He was one of the main writers on the show, and it's also directed by Brian Henson, the son of Jim Henson. This was not a Jim Henson production, but it was a show that was originally produced at Disney's Hollywood Studios, or Disney MGM Studios, as you youngsters don't remember it being nowadays, but, it was shot there. They shot some of it in Queensland, Australia, and, yeah, you probably have never even heard of the show, because just like with Father Dowling in its first season, it ran for only 8 episodes. It centers on a widowed researcher, Michael Larson, played by Frank Converse, and his 2 teen children, daughter Katie and her elder brother David. The Larsons moved to Australia after Michael was hired by wealthy industrialist Baron Trent. because that's a name I would trust, Baron Trent, to help perfect man to Dolphin Communications. To the end, Michael begins working with two dolphins named Slim and Delbert. Michael's wife dies in an automobile accident roughly a year ago. David does his best to fit in with the Aussie lifestyle and his new school, but finds it tricky. Katie, who was in the car with her mother during the fatal crash, was not injured physically, but has become an elective mute, capable of speaking but refusing ever since. So yeah, a lot of stuff is going on in this show, and I mean, from the little bit that I saw from it, it just felt like, yeah, too much was going on. It felt like there was really not a whole idea of what they were trying to accomplish with it overall. And yeah, not surprisingly, the show did not find an audience very well. CBS, like I said, CBS, like Pat Sajak said, had a number of really bad shows around that time. And yeah, CBS was not in the good spot right now, good spot where it is nowadays, where shows that they have on that go on for like 10, 20 years and all that. But like, no, CBS had a number of shows axed after a couple of episodes, and this was definitely one of those shows. So let's go ahead and move on to another show. You didn't think I had no idea Mark Summers hosted another game show, but lo and behold, Couch Potatoes exist.
Stars are coming out on the hot new series, Couch Potatoes. The game focusing on the best of television, both past and present. You never know who's coming through the door, from the current hits or from years before. Match wits with your favorite stars on Couch Potatoes. That's right. Hi, I'm Mark Summers. You bring the snacks, and I'll bring the facts, the fun, and the surprises right here on Couch Potatoes.
Weekdays at 11:30 on WSBN 7.
Kind of tying back into Wheel of Fortune, and believe it or not, that Mark Summers was actually in contention to replace Pat Sajak as the host of Wheel of Fortune in 1989, but he was eventually not the person that they got, so they went with Bob Goen instead. Couch Potatoes feels like a mix between Double Dare and also another popular game show around that time, Remote Control. On the show, you have two teams competing in a television-centered quiz show, and as you saw in the commercial there, you have a bunch of all these TV celebrities coming out and being part of the questions overall, and they have they have a game show announcer with Joe Lasky being one of the main guys on there, and then Jim McCrell took over later on. The show only lasted about 100 episodes, and it's one of those shows where it's a little too complicated for its own good. It's a show that kind of feels like it's going all over the place and never really feels like it has a true identity to it. Like I said, it's trying to be like a mix between Double Dare and Remote Control, and both of those shows work on their own merits. Trying to mesh the two together is something where it just doesn't work all together, despite the earnest efforts of Mark Summers overall. So, not much more to say about that one. Let's go ahead and move on to another show from the failed season of 1988 and 89.
Some people think I'm a workaholic.
Should we get ready to go to college?
I think my son understands. My wife doesn't, but that's why she's my ex-wife.
Okay, camera one time on Rob.
There's a lot of work that goes into making one show.
Coming out there, let's go!
And I love it.
Get her in there. All right, let's go.
Meet the lives behind the screen.
Good morning, this is Rob Miller.
And this is Carla Montgomery.
And take.
And this is Studio 5B.
Studio 5B, special preview Tuesday, January 24th.
Studio 5B is a show that I know very little about, to the point where I literally have to go to a page that is literally black right now to see even if I can find anything, because I couldn't find anything for this on Wikipedia. I couldn't find anything on this on IMDb, so this is the best that I got for you here. The series captures the behind-the-scenes action of a network morning show as seen through the eyes of its workaholic staff, so kind of essentially a precursor to the morning show, where you have a cast that also includes Wendy Crewson, pre-Santa Claus, and Jeffrey Tambor among the cast in it as well, and it only lasted about 3 episodes. Like, I'm not even kidding. It ran literally for 2 weeks. They had a preview on January 24th. It then premiered on its regular Tuesday night slot on January 29th, aired another episode on February 5th, and then gone. I mean, I guess it was their answer to broadcast news, but yeah, nobody really remembers this show, including myself. So, here's a show that at least has somewhat more memorability to it than Studio 5B that came out on ABC around that same time.
Do you know me? I knew you once in another place. I'm Hall. Saturday, January 28th.
Yeah, it's a very weird show here, because Spencer for Hire, the show that this was spun off of, was not a huge success overall. It did run for about 3 seasons, but it never really amounted to anything. But I guess the character of Avery Brooks as Hawk was very popular to the point where they decided, yeah, let's go ahead and make it its own TV show. A Man Called Hawk is based off the character from the 1976 novel Promised Land, based on one of the novels from the Spencer series by Robert B. Parker. And in it, Avery Brooks plays the character who's relocated from Boston to his hometown, Washington, D.C., and essentially it continues what he was doing in Spencer for Hire, and it only lasted about 1 season in general. And I think there could have been something interesting here. I think there maybe could have been something intriguing if they had done more with it, but it never really amounted to anything overall. I think one of the more interesting things about this is that, Avery Brooks actually wore a full head of hair on Star Trek Deep Space Nine, the show he got later on, and shaved his goatee as a means to distinguish his character of Benjamin Sisko from Hawk. And so the goatee was added during the end of the 3rd season, and then it was basically shaved back at the start of season 4 because there was a part of the production where DS9 concurred with a series of Spencer for Hire reunion films in which Brooks would reprise Hawk. So that's basically why you see Benjamin Sisko changing his hair in the rest of Star Trek Deep Space Nine after the first 3 seasons. I mean, it's such a weird thing, but I mean, there's possibilities for some good stuff here, but it never really amounted to anything, and it was gone after 1 season overall. So let's go ahead and finish this up here with a couple of PBS shows, including James Earl Jones in Long Ago and Far Away. This show ran on PBS from January 28, 1989 to December 5th of 1992, and was actually in reruns for 2 more years until being taken off the air in 1994. And each episode began with James Earl Jones sitting in a chair with a room, table, lamp, and window, and telling stories during the opening segments, and also leading to a number of different stories, including stop-motion animation, live action, or traditional stories, and all these different storylines. There's all these different narrators coming in here, like Tammy Grimes, Mia Farrow, Peter Kelsom, Regis Philbin, Kevin Kline. So they were basically classic children's stories told through the eyes of these unique different styles of animation and these different voices overall. There was a number of different videos like that too. Like you would have Robin Williams and Denzel Washington doing stories, that type of thing. So that's kind of what the show pretty much was. And it was a little bit ahead of my time overall, and I never really remembered it when it was on PBS overall. But I think everyone remembers this last show, though.
Know that public television is the place for the best children's programs. Well, now there's a new destination for children and their families. Next stop, Shining Time Station. All aboard!
Don't miss the premiere, Sunday, January 29th at 6:30 p.m.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Thomas the Tank Engine began in January of 1989 with Shining Time Station. And this one, as you see, features Ringo Starr as Mr. Conductor. It also features Dee Conn as Stacey Jones, Brian O'Connor, Leonard Jackson, Jason Wallner, and Nicole Leach. And, essentially the plot of the Thomas the Tank Engine is that you have a place called Shining Time Station, where it's a fictional train station in the Indian Valley Railroad in an unknown part of the U.S., and it's managed by Stacey Jones, Dee Conn. Its workshop is run in the first season by Harry Cupper, Ringo Starr, and thereafter by Billy Two Feathers. And then a local named Horace Schemer, simply referred to as Schemer, runs the station's arcade and serves as the series' comic relief. And of course, you have the characters from Shining Time Station, Thomas the Tank Engine, along with his friends. Thomas the Tank Engine overall was somebody that really was not in my age, was not really for me growing up overall, but of course, the longevity of this character as a whole is very much out there. I mean, there are theme parks dedicated to this character, for God's sake. So, even if I don't remember him all that much, Thomas the Tank Engine, needless to say, is a character that has certainly been through a lot over the last 36 years, and will probably continue to go through a lot as they're continuing to do things with him overall. So there you go. That's everything notable in television in the month of January. And like I said, we'll do this once a month. We'll see how this pans out overall. And let me know down below if there's anything you think I could do to fix this up a little bit here. But that's all I got for you for this week, for this special beginning of this. Hopefully this will continue on. But with all that said, if you enjoyed this, hit the like button, subscribe button, notification button. And I will see you guys next month for February 1989 in television.